The birthday party. Ella's 7th birthday had finally arrived, and the excitement in her tiny heart was almost too much to bear. For weeks, she had been counting down the days, dreaming of the balloons, the colorful decorations, the cake shaped like a princess castle, and the dozens of gifts she'd unwrap while surrounded by her friends. Her mother had worked tirelessly to plan the perfect party, and this year she'd gone the extra mile. She had hired clowns to perform a show. It was supposed to be magical, an unforgettable day in Ella's young life. The backyard was transformed into a wonderland. Pink and white streamers twisted along the fence, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy mingling in the air. Tables were covered in brightly colored cloths, topped with party hats, noisemakers, and little bags filled with goodies. Ella twirled in her sparkly new dress, her hair tied with a matching pink bow, and greeted her friends as they arrived, each carrying a brightly wrapped present. Laughter filled the yard as the kids played tag, giggling and chasing each other through a maze of balloons. Parents gathered near the refreshments table, sipping punch and chatting while keeping a watchful eye on their children. Shortly after noon, the clowns arrived. The kids stopped playing as the trio approached, drawing every gaze to their bright costumes. The lead clown introduced himself as Jacob, a tall, lanky figure in a patched yellow suit with oversized shoes that squeaked with every step. His face was painted stark white, his nose a perfect crimson bulb, and his smile stretched unnaturally wide, as though it had been carved into his face. Flanking him were two smaller clowns, both carrying large battered trunks filled with props. They didn't introduce themselves, letting Jacob take the spotlight. "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls," Jacob announced with a deep bow, his voice smooth and theatrical. "Prepare yourselves for the show of a lifetime." The performance began innocently enough. Jacob juggled flaming pins, eliciting gasps and cheers from the children as he pretended to fumble, letting one drop dangerously close to his foot. His companions performed slapstick comedy, tumbling over each other in exaggerated motions, their antics drawing laughter from the crowd. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. Ella sat on a small folding chair near the front, her eyes wide with wonder, as Jacob made a bouquet of flowers appear from thin air, offering it to her with a wink. She giggled nervously, clutching the flowers close. But then, little things started to feel wrong. During the second act, Jacob's humor turned oddly dark. He made a joke about how kids who didn't behave might vanish forever. Most of the children laughed, but Ella felt a chill crawl up her spine. His eyes, hidden beneath the exaggerated arches painted on his face, locked onto hers for just a second too long. When he laughed, it wasn't quite right, low and gravelly, like a growl. Then came the balloon animals. Jacob and his assistants twisted balloons into intricate shapes, dogs, swords, hats. He handed them out to the children, who squealed with delight. But Ella noticed something unsettling. The balloons weren't shaped quite like they should be. The dogs' legs were twisted unnaturally long, the swords curved like they'd melted, and one of the hats resembled a noose. The other kids didn't seem to notice, though, laughing as they ran around waving their balloon creations in the air. It was during this chaos that the first child went missing. Tommy, a boy from Ella's class, was there one moment and gone the next. His mother called his name, her voice growing more frantic with each passing second. Jacob stepped in, his painted grin never faltering. "Don't worry," he said smoothly. "Kids love to explore. I'm sure he'll turn up soon." But his words didn't soothe the growing unease that crept over the party. The show went on, but now the laughter was tinged with nervousness. Ella couldn't shake the feeling that Jacob knew exactly where Tommy was. The second disappearance happened during the magic show. Jacob called for a volunteer, and Ella's best friend, Sophie, eagerly raised her hand. "A brave soul," Jacob declared, leading Sophie to the center of the makeshift stage. He draped a shimmering silver curtain over her and began muttering in a low, guttural tone. His assistants joined in, their voices blending into an eerie harmony that didn't sound like any language Ella had ever heard. The curtain dropped and Sophie was gone. The audience clapped hesitantly, expecting Sophie to reappear, but she didn't. Ella's heart raced. She looked around, hoping to see her friend peeking out from behind the stage, but Sophie was nowhere to be found. Jacob seemed unfazed. "Ah, it seems our volunteer has decided to stay in the magic realm," he said with a chuckle. "Don't worry, she's having the time of her life." By now, the parents were on edge. The laughter had died down, replaced by whispered conversations and uneasy glances. One mother grabbed her child and left, muttering about how she'd never trusted clowns. But most stayed, unsure of what to do. It was, after all, just a show, wasn't it? As the afternoon wore on, the atmosphere grew darker. The vibrant balloons began to deflate, their colors dulling under the grayish light of an overcast sky. The children, once full of energy, now clung to their parents, their laughter replaced by nervous giggles. Ella's mom, noticing her daughter's pale face, knelt down beside her. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" she asked. Ella hesitated, then whispered, "Mom, I don't like them. They're scary." Her mother frowned, looking toward the stage where Jacob was performing another trick. "It's just pretend, honey," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Ella wasn't convinced. She noticed the way Jacob's eyes darted toward her when he thought no one was looking, how his painted smile seemed to twist into something more sinister. The other two clowns, who had been mostly silent throughout the show, began moving through the crowd. Ella watched as they quietly slipped small objects, watches, wallets, even a pair of earrings, into their oversized pockets. "Mom, they're stealing," Ella hissed, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Her mother turned to look, but saw nothing. "Ella, don't make up stories," she scolded gently, but her tone was distracted. Then it happened. The power in the backyard went out. The string lights that had been strung around the yard flickered and died, plunging the space into an eerie twilight. The kids screamed, and the parents scrambled to find their phones for light. In the confusion, Jacob's voice rose above the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen, the grand finale is upon us." His tone was sharp now, commanding, and something in it made Ella's blood run cold. Jacob reached into his trunk and pulled out a long, gleaming knife. He twirled it in his hand as if it were part of the act, but his eyes glowed with something darker, something dangerous. "Thank you for being such a wonderful audience," he said, bowing low. "But every show must come to an end." The other two clowns stood at his side, their painted faces now distorted into grotesque masks of malice. Ella didn't wait to see what would happen next. Grabbing Rex, her golden retriever, by the collar, she bolted toward the house. Rex barked furiously, his growls echoing in the darkened yard. The other kids screamed and scattered, but Ella didn't look back. She burst into the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. She peeked out the window and saw Jacob standing in the center of the yard, his knife gleaming in the dim light. He seemed to be looking straight at her. The police arrived minutes later, summoned by a frantic call from one of the parents. But when they entered the backyard, the clowns were gone. Their trunks, the stage, even the decorations they'd brought with them had vanished without a trace. The only evidence of their presence was a single balloon tied to the fence, its surface marked with a painted smile that mirrored Jacob's. The missing children were never found, and the birthday party became the stuff of legend in the small town. Ella and her family moved away shortly after, haunted by the memories of that day. Years later, on her 18th birthday, Ella found a package on her doorstep. Inside was a single red balloon and a note scrawled in smeared black paint. "See you soon.